Hello everyone, welcome back to the course on Health Humanities, Indian and Western Medical Knowledge Traditions. This is lecture number 54, Modern Indian and Western Medical Traditions. In this lecture, I will talk about Western and Indian medical systems and how they have evolved, and will focus upon particularly in the modern period, that is uh, in the Indian context going back to the colonialism and after that, and how modern Western medicine has emphasized biomedicine and sciences, and at the same time it has led to some kind of operation, and it has influenced the healthcare system in a very negative as well as in a very positive way as well. In this regard, I will be also talking about the neoliberalism and globalization and how they shaped the modern concept of healthcare. In this regard, I will focus on how the idea of modern healthcare system has been part of the globalized, neoliberal, and multinational, transnational corporate culture, as well as different types of practices that are shaping the modern medical care. When we look at the development of medicine in Indian context, and then we cannot ignore the history of colonialism, which has not only suppressed the Indian medical traditions as well as Indian medical thoughts, but also has imposed and brought the Western medical model, and it has led to the idea of colonial control, colonial domination. We find that the idea of controlling the society, the people, the indigenous cultures were part of colonial medical systems, and they got this idea from the European concepts of hospitals, European concepts of clinics, which was born not only to help the people but also to keep an eye on the people who are seen as insane or abnormal, as well as it was also a medium of control and domination. And that idea got implemented in the Indian medical systems, particularly in the Western medical systems in India during colonial period. And when it was introduced in India, the Western medicine in India or Western hospitals in India, they prioritized the Europeans, the British soldiers and British officials over the locals, over the indigenous people. And their concerns for public health were often politically motivated. The aim was not to help the people in a very just manner, but also to find out all the information about Indian culture, traditions, about Indian resources, and how then they can pass this information to the authorities in the British context, in the British companies. Western medicine also marginalized the indigenous medicine. They also racialized it, that this medicine, the Indian medical system, are poor in quality. It has no scientific basis. It has no rational basis. And they thought that this is, or they popularized it, that Indian medical practice is of very lower quality. Further, when we look at the context of Western medicine in India, or maybe Indian medicine in India, the healthcare facilities for poor was underfunded, or it was like very low. We find in the colonial period some references of like Lady Dufferin Fund, which was meant for providing free medical facilities to the Indian women, but it has again a negative history. And when we look at medical practices in India, it emerges from the church, from the missionary practices and clinics that aim to not only cure the people but also convert the people. So during the colonial period, the healthcare in India, though if it was having their own system of thought, then that were suppressed and marginalized and racialized, and the induction and introduction of Western medicine was claimed with the idea of power and domination. When we look at the notion of healthcare in India after post-independence, we find that India aimed to create equitable health systems. Though there is still a lot of disparities and a large number of population is still not having a very good quality of access to health. The PHCs and CSCs brought care to the rural populations, but they were not sufficient. The rural populations, the poor, still remain far away from the medical traditions. We find that in post-independence period, the focus was on mass sanitization and vaccinations. It can be vaccinations about uh, some kind of. In the post-independence period, we find the focus on mass sanitations and vaccinations. And it helped India to get free from different kinds of problems, different kinds of diseases. And however, with soon, with the rise of globalization, the medical system in India were privatized, and that led to the disparity between healthcare systems. That those who can afford, they had access of better healthcare facilities, but those who couldn't afford, they had no access to good healthcare systems. Further, in the post-independence India, health was also linked with climate and endemic diseases. Further, we find that in the present time that there is a kind of pluralization of medical facilities, where a number of Indian medical facilities were recognized under AYUS, and AYUS stands for Ayurveda, Yoga, Unani, Siddha, and Homeopathy. In this way, Indian medical system embraces multiple healing systems, and it contrasts with Western dominance of allopathy. Moreover, we also find that the government institutionalizes traditional medicines, and this institutionalization of traditional medicine has led to the development of Indian medical systems, and where Indian medical practices became popular. But colonial legacies still influence healthcare policies in India. Colonial legacies still control the healthcare policies in India. When we look at the Western medical practices, they are influenced by enlightenment, rationalism, and science. Foucault has talked about how medical knowledge in the West is linked with power and surveillance, how the idea of panopticon, how the idea of the birth of clinics are associated with power, surveillance, exclusion, and control. And the development of clinic and diagnostic medicine in the West had this very long history of power and control. And we find that slowly there is a change in the Western medical practices, and medical gauge gets replaced by patient's narrative. and in response, narrative medicine emerges. The emergence of narrative medicine has led to the development of an understanding of the social aspect of health, the social determinants of health, that how society, how culture, how different practices influence one's access to the healthcare practices. However, uh, due to liberalism or due to globalization and consumer culture or due to industrialization, we find that there is a number of what we call pharmaceutical industries coming into existence, and this has led to the privatization of different medical systems, where the access of medical system becomes less to those people who are on the margins of society, those who are poor, those who belong to the remote areas. Further, the privatization of pharmaceutical industries has depersonalized patients, has reduced empathy, and it needs to be taken care of, because depersonalization of patients, depersonalization of the care will not help the patients. And in this regard, we need an inclusive patient-centered care. But we find that because of the rise of privatization and industrialization, the focus is on how medicine can, or medical practice can become a source of income, and then this has led to the marginalization of patients in different countries. But the medical humanities and health humanities aim to critique such kind of practices and provide that how it can lead to the crisis in health. To conclude, Indian system fosters a pluralistic and community care. But and where we have different forms of medicine, different types of medicines, and however, this kind of practices are changing with the passage of time. In the Western medical context, we find that though they focus on quick response, but it has issues in terms of access, equity, and empathy. We also find that there's a need for balance in terms of science, ethics, and traditions. And the future of healthcare, the future of medical practices lies in compassionate, inclusive healthcare facilities systems. Thank you.